Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Poland Daily Travel. I'm Will Richardson, and if you've been watching previous episodes, you'll know where I am. But I'll go ahead and disclose, if you don't recognize what's behind me and next to me. I'm in Poznan in the Old Town, which is one of the great Renaissance towns north of the Alps. That's right, one of the great Renaissance areas. At least that's what the architect of the town hall called it. His name was Quadra, and he was from Lugano. But I'll tell you something, this particular statue right here is called a pranger, or it's a kind of a pillory, if you like. And in the old days, if you were naughty, sometimes very naughty, they would tie you to this thing. And when I say old days, they would tie you to this thing and punish you. I'll get to that in a second. But when I say old days, it's important to remember what old days mean in this context. In this context, the old days are the 1500s. That's right, the Tudor times. Well, we all know that Henry VIII, for example, was prone to cut off his wives' heads or otherwise get rid of them, imprison them. So there was a lot of brutal activity, even up into the Renaissance. And this is what this represents. People who particularly could be women, for example, talk about women's rights or being treated civilly. Well, it wasn't so easy back then. And we can see this as an example. If you were wearing too frilly clothes, if you were exposing too much flesh, if you were too boisterous and joyful, and you were from the working class, if you were one of the workers, which is anybody who's not an aristocrat, more or less, or a burgher or an upstanding middle-class merchant, you'd be tied to this. And not beaten, but people would realize that you had done something wrong. And you could be, I suppose you have rotten vegetables thrown at you or things like that. At the same time, in America, for example, or in England, they had things called the pillories, which people would put their head and their arms into. I'm just looking over there because there's a couple that's getting married. They're having their pictures taken. You want to get that on the camera? Vlad, get that on the camera. The people there, yeah, get those people. Yeah, there you go. Wonderful, okay, yeah. And they're getting their pictures taken. They're getting their pictures taken here because why not? It's a beautiful place. So, as I was saying, the pillory was usually made of wood, and it was called the stocks. And you would be put in there, and people would pelt you with rotten vegetables and generally humiliate you. And that's what this was all about. The pranger, it's called. The pranger. On the top, you see this is a crusader representing, I suppose, justice and the power of the Almighty. The column itself is Gothic in style. You can see it's got these various eight panels. But the funny thing about it is this is not the real one. The real one is in a museum because it was being constantly defaced and had graffiti, not greety, but graffiti. I don't know what greety is. Put on it, so they took the other one away, and in 1925 this one was created. So it wasn't getting any respect even 100 years ago. At any rate, that's the story of the pranger. My advice, don't get tied to it. Also, they would maybe cut off your ear. I don't know if that was you were listening too much, or cut off one of your fingers, perhaps if you were taking something. I don't know. But those were some of the martial punishments. But they didn't beat people or torture them. They just might snip off a finger, but what the heck is that? That didn't cost you anything. Anyway, there you are, the pranger. Stay tuned. We're in Poznan, we're in the Stare Miasto, and this is Poland Daily Travel. I'm Will Richardson, back after the bumper. Right, so welcome back after the bumper. We leave the torture device, the pranger, behind us and come over here and talk about Persephone, the goddess in Greek culture, Proserpina in Roman culture, I think that's the correct pronunciation, the goddess of fertility, the cycle of life, often associated with the underworld, of course, because she represents the mysticism of the female. And how interesting that over here we've got a place where you tie the woman and punish her for being too voluptuous in her display, which might even be modest. You punish her. But over here you have this beautiful, elegant statue, which is coming out nicely in the sun, which is in total contrast. Almost a worship of the mystery of what it is to be a female. And any man, as can I, can attest to that mystery, and still constantly trying to fathom it, to understand it, to capture that spirit, which is so different than the male outlook. Yeah. Persephone. Her father, of course, Ceres, associated with the underworld. Once again, the dark and mysterious magic of what we can't understand, of what, and I think that if you look at this and think about the pranger, and you're punishing the women there and then worshiping here, and isn't that a lot like life? Isn't that a lot like what happens in life? People are alternately punished and praised, and sometimes the same paragraph. Interesting stuff. There are 4 of these statues. One of them, of course, is Neptune. I don't remember the other 2, but we'll get pictures of them and talk about them a bit later. So there we are. That's all I got to say about that, as far as Gump would say. I'm Will Richardson. We're in Poznan, and the story may stay with us for the next episode, and hang in there.